My dad used to put me behind the wheel in his lap and let me drive a Model A pickup. I got to the top and there was a car parked in the normal way to get in. And it overloaded my mind. and my dad grabbed the wheel and everything, and you know, before we knew it, we were down to the thing and we ran into the garage. I can't remember when I didn't want to fly. As a youngster, I had that enthusiasm for aviation, and I really don't know. I was just fascinated by it. I looked up the requirements. You had to be. You had to have 2 years of college in those days, 20 years old, unmarried, and of course physically fit. We went to primary, basic, and advanced schools, and then from Bakersfield I went to Phoenix, Arizona, to Luke Field. And as part of that training, you did actually shoot some 50 caliber mounted on the T6. The famous T6 probably trained more people than anybody in the whole world. Sure enough, my duty assignment came out and I went to a P-39 fighter unit in the San Francisco Bay Area. Here I am, a California boy, and I haven't hardly left the state. Well, when I had the car the whole time we were in training, I had no idea that he had a 39 Ford convertible, tan, and all this. Of course, that's what I had, and I had it from 1941 through 45, and then he sent Ed in there, and he had some tools scattered all over, you know, big tools, hammers and big pipe wrench, you know, and stuff. And Ed says, "Hey, Jack's having a little trouble with a carburetor out there, and he needs your help." And Jack's eyes got a little big, you know, and "Hey, I can't get this screw out. Do you think it'd be all right to use a chisel?" And he says, "Now wait a minute, let's." And then he knew he'd been had when he could see. A very lucky thing happened to me while I was there. I was selected as a member of an original cadre to form up a new fighter group. And this new fighter group was the 357th Fighter Group. And we went over to Hamilton Field where the headquarters was and checked in and learned that we were just on our way to Tonopah, Nevada, which is where we were going to start our training. Every place they had a fighter unit, they usually had a skeet range because shooting at moving targets polished aerial gunnery skills. So we had guns, we had ammo, and we had more game than we ever could have shot. It had been nearly a year since I'd gotten my wings, and I was beginning to wonder if I would ever fight. On November 9th, 1943, we left on a troop train for Camp Shanks, New York. Where we were going was a big secret, supposedly. Yet when we got there, joining up with the 362nd and 354th Squadrons, it was clear we were going to England and that we weren't bringing the P-39s along. So, you know, here we are now. We've got the Mustang. We have a requirement in Europe, an urgent requirement for P-51 Mustangs to escort the B-17s. And where do you think the first Mustangs actually went? To what Air Force? We sent them to the 9th Air Force. And they were so wildly successful that the Air Force, 8th Air Force, demanded that they get the P-51. The 357th Fighter Group, the one I was assigned to, was the 2nd Army Air Corps unit to get the new Mustang. It was, you know, you were scared. You're scared of the unknown. You didn't know what was going to happen. You know, how am I going to react? Am I going to fight or am I going to run? You know, it's kill or be killed. It's not, you know, this is real. So I'm flying formation with them. We're doing the escorting. And somebody on the radio just says, "Mustang, Mustang, there's one on your tail." And I said, holy smokes, you know. And he zigzagged around a little bit. And I'm saying, boy, I'm right there with him, though. So we keep on going. And he said, "Mustang, Mustang, he's still on your tail, you know." And I said, holy smokes, you know. And so I zipped out a little bit, and the guy hollers again. And so my flight lead then, he just whipped, he thought they were talking about him. And so he took some drastic evasive maneuvers, and I'm staying right with him, you know. And pretty soon he lost me. And I pull up, and there's no airplanes in the sky. You know, a little while ago there was all kinds of airplanes, and here I am over Germany all by myself, the thing you're not supposed to do. Well, fortunately, about, you know, it seemed like forever, but then I saw an airplane, I went up and joined on him, and he was my flight lead. We never found out who the guy was that hollered, you know, and of course I was green. I should have slipped out and looked around and said, "Hey, lead, you're okay, you know, there's nobody behind us," but I had no idea what was going on. I was just hanging on. And that's my first combat experience at all.
Came back from his tour. When he left and he got over to his base and he tried to find Jack, that's when he found out that Jack had been shot down. And then when he came back from his first tour, he came to see me, and I don't know, it just happened. We fell in love with each other, so that's it.
Still, we weren't about to plunge into anything. We promised to write and to see where things went, and we left it at that. And she gave me a picture, and I carried it with me the rest of the war. I carried it right into combat in a small black leather folder we used to carry our identification. I still have that picture in a small leather folder.
Bud Anderson was already an experienced fighter pilot and a flight leader, but he still had to get his first victory in the air. His chance came at 15,000 feet over Germany on March 3rd, 1944.
So we head over there, and the other squadron follows along, and all of a sudden from out here, the B-17's down here, 3 ME-109s come in here. They're bellied up to us. You know, they didn't see us, obviously, because there was, you know, seven or eight of us. They're going after the straggler. So, okay, guys, I'm the flight leader. One of those is mine. And I've got this guy. But we're not in these nice concentric circles. We're coming at each other at really high angles at each other. And I'd say, Jesus, why can't I get on this guy's tail? You know, I can't figure out why I'm not more successful. And so I'm saying, I'm going to pull through him and then fire a burst out here and hope he flies through it. I'd been through 3 gunnery schools and I knew how to shoot quail. So I thought, by God, maybe I'll scare him at least and get him to break out of this thing and I can get on his tail better. You really want to get it back here at 6 o'clock and get into close to shoot somebody. So he comes around, I pull it through. I can't see him, of course, because I'm bellied up like this and he's bellied up like this. I got tracked him very accurately, fired a long burst like that. Not a long burst, but a burst. And when he came into sight, he's cooling, is streaming. He's burst gray smoke just pouring out of him. Lucky shot. I got him with a golden BB. And he pulls up like this right there and bails out immediately. Yeah, man, I said, I'm kind of sitting there cheering, and I looked out at my wing, and geez, here's a guy right on my wing. And it was Johnny England Air Force Base. You know where that is? That's the guy that that base was named after. And he'd already had a couple of victories. And we were down low. He had his mask off, and he was laughing, and he went like this, and I thought, wait a minute, did that guy shoot that thing down out from under me? I knew it was a lucky shot, and I just couldn't, and I thought, holy smokes, that wasn't very sportsmanlike, but, I guess there's a war on, it's okay. And so I filed a claim and asked him to hold it. And they looked at me kind of funny when they said that. And I said, yeah, I got to talk to a guy and get a confirmation. So I head over to the club, and where he's in a different squadron, obviously. And so now I'm on the way over there, and I'm thinking, how the hell do I bring this up? I'm going to say, hey, you jerk, did you shoot that thing down out from under me? Or, how am I going to handle this without being a jerk myself? So I go in there, and there he is on the end of the bar, and he comes rushing over to me, and he says, Andy, he says, that's the greatest shot I ever saw. You got that sucker out there at 60 degrees angle off. I go like this, oh, Johnny, lucky shot. That's the story how Bud Anderson got his first victory. Pull up on him, and then get right behind him. That's the way. You don't want to shoot out here at a high angle off. It's impossible to hit.
Jim, take his mic.
And
Jim's going to help you with your mic.
You want me to hold the mic?
Not yet. Yeah.
He's not to that point.
The next time he come around, and I'm coming at him at this high angle off, this might help a little bit here. What was happening, that he was pulling all this G, and I'm pulling, and but then I'm right on top of him, and I'm just following him down. I need two hands to do all this dogfighting here, right?
I was one to get in there and help you with. You need three hands, actually, right now.
Fighter pilots, if I had to sit on my hands, I wouldn't be able to tell you this story. I'm coming at him at this high angle. I'm trying to get in there, and I just can't. Then he... put it right there, and I can't get on him, and then he goes by, and then he kind of makes a high angle pass. We got into this circling dogfight. I need a prop here.
This is my job. That's the reason I'm still here.
When you're in a dogfight, you want to get right on a guy's tail, just like this, right here. That's where you want to be. I tell my non-drinking friends, or my Baptist friends, that it's named after the most intelligent bird that flies in the sky, the crow. And that generally is recognized. The crow is a very cagey bird. But my drinking buddies all know it's named after that good old Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey.
So I'm Jim Hagedorn. I'm the CEO of Scott's Miracle-Gro, and that's my bird. Started flying as a kid, went in the Air Force, flew F-16s 7 years, and then been lucky enough to meet a bunch of these people here. So, of course, the star is that old guy right there who is, you know, truly a legend, and like no joke, a fighter pilot legend. Jack Roush, who has added so much to this ability. When I bought my airplane from him, he interviewed me like I was a scrub. And part of it is making sure that if you're going to buy this, you know what it is, that it's a piece of history of the United States. It's important, and that you respect it and share it. And that's part of why we're here.
Jack's a perfectionist. I remember one time I was at Myrtle Beach, and he said, "Is there anything wrong with that airplane?" And I said, "Well, no, but I noticed there was a little vibration." I said, "You'll be flying along straight, and it'll be steady, and then it'll be steady." And Christ, I think he tore the whole airplane apart and had it propeller rebalanced and things like that. Next time I flew it, boy, that thing was so smooth, I couldn't believe it.
Connie Bolin, who's the president of Warbirds, when I learned to fly the airplane, which, of course, another one of these Jack things, now, you know, he is a little bit of a, you know, I promise not to use a lot of bad language, but he's a little bit of a butthole. Jack made me promise contract. He had a contract that says I can never change the name of the airplane.
I love to fly. I learn something every time I fly, and I enjoy it. And to be able to fly a Mustang at my age is something very special. And not just a Mustang, say a Mustang painted like mine. Do you realize that I've had 4 different airplanes, Old Crows? And there's 2 still up. Two of them are still flying. One of them crashed, and one got sold and is being repainted at the moment. But when I was able to fly those things, I don't know. It was a special event. I think you can imagine. I finished my tour on 15th of January 1945. 2 weeks later, I was back in the United States. I hadn't intended to get married. It just kind of happened. Landed in the States on February 1st, 1945, and married my pen pal, the widow Eleanor Cosby Stacker, 22 days later. It took me a few days to get from the East Coast to California, and I know I asked her at least a week before we got married. Figure it out. The courtship lasted no more than 10 days to 2 weeks. pretty intense.
I've just been very lucky, and so has Bud, and you know, we respect each other, and I think that's important.
Boy. You know, I'm coming to think that respecting and liking each other, you put the two together.
Well, you're good friends as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I personally lost two of my good friends that I thought really a lot of, Jim Browning and Eddie Simpson. And I thought so much of them that I actually named my son James Edward Anderson after him. This is a story about father and son flying a combat mission together. So the mission he picked for us to go on, they had speakers out on the wingtips like this. They'd go over these communist strongholds and propaganda, broadcast propaganda for, so many minutes. Then we'd come by and drop the surrender leaflets or the safe passage. So okay, Dad, just throw out the leaflets. And I leaned over and my favorite knife flipped out of my flight suit and went sailing down into the jungle, followed by lots of leaflets. Anyway, words can't describe the emotions you go through flying on a mission with your own son, a combat mission. But my late wife, Ellie, had a few words to say about it. She was damn glad she didn't know about it until it was all over. Newcastle was my home of record. I actually lived on a farm, not in a city. And I always felt I never had a hometown, really. And since I moved back here in 1984 for family concerns and things like that, of course Ellie was from Auburn. I've lived now in one place the longest I ever have. And a thing like this, it's just beyond awesome. I really feel like I have a hometown now, Auburn.
Had the honor to help MC a number of presentations that Colonel Anderson has made to the public, both at Oshkosh and some other places around the country. Take note of the fact that he's one of America's greatest heroes. The kind of person, as a man and as a young man, as an adult, that we'd all like to have been ourselves, or we'd certainly like for our children to be. He's a great patriot and a great brave defender of our country and our freedoms. He's one of the world's greatest aviators. But past that, he's one of my dearest friends.
I guess I was fairly apprehensive the whole time that I was flying in combat. And I guess there's good reason to feel that way. I'm there to cause a lot of damage and a lot of harm, and therefore they would like to damage me. And I was 25 years old at that time. Top Gun was really a thrill. I must have done well in actual combat because at the time I was just a lieutenant junior grade, which is a first lieutenant in the Air Force. And so I may have been the very first lieutenant junior grade to go through Top Gun. That was the dream of a lifetime come true. I had wanted to be an aeronautical engineer and a test pilot just like my dad from the time I was 10 years old. STS-27 was my third launch, and it was only the second launch after the Challenger accident. Well, I will never forget, we maneuvered the arm, and Mike Mullane was my arm operator, so he moved the arm over there, and we brought up the television image of the right wing, and I looked at what I was seeing, and I said to myself, we are gonna die. To be an airline pilot, there was mandatory age 60 retirement. I was a NASA astronaut until I was 50 years old. And so I looked at the situation, and I had known a number of Southwest airline pilots. And they were just like me. They were flying because they loved to fly. Well, there's a lot of piloting that goes into it, a tremendous amount of piloting that goes into it, because you're going to wind up passing other airplanes. You're going to get in a duel with another airplane that's fairly closely matched. So there's a ton of satisfaction from doing that. And hey, let's just talk about the racing itself. It's fun to fly low, but it's dangerous.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Connie Boland. Welcome to Warbirds in Review. Thank you, Jim Hagedorn, getting out of your old crow, and to Jack Roush, standing back here, who provides his airplane for my pleasure. And it is a real pleasure to pay honor to Colonel Bud Anderson with these two aircraft painted as his schemes were in World War II. This was the early model, the B model. Jim is in the D model. I have to say thank you to all of you for being here, for the support we get for Warbirds in Review and the T6s lining up here. This is a pretty sight from here. Scott's Miracle-Gro Company, Jim Hagedorn is a huge sponsor of Warbirds in Review and all things Warbirds, so my thanks to Jim as always, and to Ron and Diane Fagan, who provided us with the Quonset hut, and to all the other sponsors that make this possible, and you people who enjoy watching all of this. And I would like to now ask David Hartman to bring our guest on stage. In just a few minutes, we'll watch the video first, and then I would like to come back once our guests are on stage and make a very special announcement. Please watch the video that is the intro that produced by Sleeping Dog Productions, who do a phenomenal job for us here at Warbirds in Review. Enjoy.
In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria, and by 1938, controlled most of China. During those same years, Hitler was building his war machine. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland. By 1941, Germany controlled Denmark and Norway, Belgium and Luxembourg, the Netherlands and France, Yugoslavia and Greece, and then invaded Russia. In 1940, the incredible British fought off the Germans in the air, the Battle of Britain. For many Americans then, the mood was to stay neutral, stay out of foreign wars. Of course, that was not to be. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The next day, the United States declared war on Japan, and 3 days later, on Germany and Italy. Over the next 4 years, our country was transformed militarily, economically, and in the most human terms describable. It was the most widespread war in history. It's estimated that at least 75 million people died. By 1944, more than 2.5 million men and women were serving in the Army Air Corps. Over the course of the war, some 40,000 American airmen died. 18,000 went missing. 41,000 were captured. These numbers seem incomprehensible today. We and our allies in combat and at home paid huge personal prices to save the free world from oppression. Our veteran guest aviator this afternoon is a retired Air Force colonel. He flew Mustangs with the 357th Fighter Group out of Leiston, England, nicknamed the Oxford Boys. He was a major at age 22, flying 2 tours, logging 116 missions over Europe. He was a triple ace with 16 and a quarter air victories and is currently the ranking American living ace of World War II. After the war, he continued his career as a test pilot. His last assignment was commanding a tactical fighter wing in Vietnam. Please welcome Jack Roush, Jim Hagedorn, and Colonel Bud Anderson.
Okay. I don't
Yeah,
know. Yeah. Yeah.
Jim Hagedorn. Jim, founder and president CEO, chairman and CEO of Scott's Miracle-Gro, and he is responsible, as you can see right here, for so much of the continuing expansion of warbirds in America. Jack Roush, of course, chairman of Roush Industries, and is known, of course, for Roush Racing. They own these two airplanes right here, and of course, Bud, we'll get to Bud in just a second. So, Jim, start us off, would you? Why is it so important for you to continue to support warbirds and keep helping expand it the way you do?
Why is it important? Well, Roush, when he sold me this airplane, interviewed me and talked to me about this sort of idea of stewarding an important piece of sort of American wartime and aviation history. And until he thought I was serious about it, he wouldn't sell me the airplane. So do I think he was right? Yeah, I think we are so lucky to be able to, go up and fly. We flew 3 times this morning. The flying here, if you don't know, it is probably the best warbird flying there is. So we were, I think, a 6-ship and a 5-ship each time, flying mostly with other military dudes. And so it's important that we not crash them all, because we like to have fun with them. But Jack's, how many are still flying, Jack?
About 130.
130 of them left, and every single one of them is important. And so it's a really big deal to be able to participate with this group and keep alive sort of what happened during the war. The sacrifice that the aviators, I think, put in more than anybody. And it's a good time for me to fly them too, so I like that part.
Jim, thank you. I know you've got another gig to go to, so thank you, and for all you do for warbirds. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I sit down.
Connie, I know you've got something you want to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, you heard me earlier in jumping out of the airplane, which is always a great way to make an entrance. So thank you again, guys. That was pretty fun for me. I hope everybody here enjoyed it. But I do have a special announcement that is a surprise announcement here. The EA Warbirds of America each year chooses someone who makes a significant contribution to the warbird community and our mission to keep them flying. I am very pleased that this year the EA Warbirds of America board has chosen our friend Jack Roush as the Warbird 2018 Hall of Fame recipient.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I was introduced to Mustang flying by Ed and Connie Boland in the early 1990s. And Ed soloed me in his J3 Cub and soloed me in his T6. He marshaled me around and lined me up, much like I tried to keep Jim in line for a while we were getting started. And You know, the roots that are put down here are put down by Ed Boland and Connie Boland, and I've just been proud to carry on the tradition, be a small part of it. I know that when I got my first P-51 organized and I was trying to choose a motif for it in the early 1990s, I talked to Colonel Bud Anderson, who was introduced to by Mickey Rupp, who'd had an airplane that was painted up like the old Crow D model there for a while, but he was a Reno Air Racer, and he changed the motif on it. And I'd helped Mickey with his engines for Reno, and he said that that if I wanted to figure out who to paint the airplane like, whose military career to celebrate, that the person who had the most of the stats and most of the pictures and the things that would be necessary to recreate was Colonel Bud Anderson. And so I called Colonel Anderson and asked him whose career we should celebrate and what we could do to make the airplane interesting to the future generations that would be exposed to it. He gave me the list of a list that had 3 names on it. His name was not on it. And I looked at their careers and what they'd accomplished, and I knew a little bit about Colonel Bud Anderson and of course what he'd done and his experimental aviation flying and all the trials and tribulations he had, the people that were lost in that exercise. And I said that, you know, that I give Mickey Rupp a call and tell him if he was not going to repaint his airplane like Colonel Anderson's, that I'd like to do it myself with the airplane I was preparing. I said I'd told Mickey, you know, what I need, and very quickly I got a call back from Chuck Yeager that said that he was very happy that I was going to paint my airplane like Andy's, since Ed and Connie had prepared one like Yeager had flown, that they could do a lot of things that would celebrate the 50th and the 75th and future celebrations of the things that happened in World War II. And we've enjoyed for years bringing the 2 airplanes here, the gentleman, or the Oak Crow and the Faux Crow. No, the Faux Crow was later. We had the Glamorous Glen first, and Chuck and Yeager flew to start the air shows for at least a decade while they were both flying warbirds. But it's been my pleasure to be involved with all the pilots that have flown the airplanes, and certainly with Colonel Anderson and his proud career. And I'm humbled by the honor that's been put on me here. Thank you, Connie, for that, and thank all the Warbird committee members that have participated in that selection. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Jack. And what you see in the racing world, what Jack has done with his innovations in the racing world, you have no idea what you've done for keeping these airplanes going. So your contributions are amazing. Now, I'm going to step out of this picture, and Jim, if you need to leave or if you want to talk, I mean, you know, David, you've got him.
Yeah, Jim?
Yeah, I'd just like to talk about Roush for a second. So I flew F-16s in the Air Force for 7 years, got out, went into our family business, and we were looking to sponsor a car, and somebody said, you know, Roush's got a bunch of Mustangs. Any interest in flying with them? And I'd never been in a Mustang. I always thought they were really cool. So I show up at Roush's place in Michigan, and he throws me in the back of an airplane. And, you know, these things V&E at about 500 miles an hour. And we are close to V&E, below the tree line, with a guy I've never flown with no controls. And this started not only did I get out of it and say, can I buy one of your airplanes? Because he was about to have 3. And so thankfully, I passed the interview with Roush. But Roush has been a friend ever since. And, you know, it is not an understatement to talk about Jack's contribution to the Mustangs, and particularly, you know, he's an engine guy, really, at heart, and to the Merlin motor. So Jack, I think, is the only FAA-certified repair station for the Merlin. You know, you get in a single-engine airplane with a single pilot, And there's a point where you just have to trust the engine. And trusting an engine that Jack has touched and his people have touched, which he's got a super fine team, you can trust the motor. Jack's come up with roller bearings on the cam, different pistons, connecting rods, you just name it, improvements that Packard and Rolls-Royce never made to these engines. Jack has made those changes. There's a lot of dudes flying these airplanes, and Connie, the one female, who depend on Jack to innovate and make these motors even better after all these years. And between Jack, Connie, her late husband, Ed, all these people, when you learn how to fly an airplane like this, I go to a board meeting and say, it's always like 1 inch from a train wreck. Flying old fighters like this is, something that's can always go bad pretty fast. And having friends like the warbird community here at EAA and Roush makes such a difference to being able to fly one of these airplanes and maintain one of these airplanes safely. And there's a whole team of people that y'all don't see that support these airplanes. And the Bolins and Jack have been a big part of making this whole kind of thing work. So Jack, you deserve it.
Thank you, man.
Congratulations, and he's a really good guy.
I'll pay you for that later.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks, Jim.
Fly safe.
So, Jack. Oh, Buddy Anderson's here, too. That's right. Yeah. Jack, how much, we just heard Jim talk about improvements you've made on the airplanes. How similar is the inner workings, are these airplanes to the P-51 Mustangs that Bud and his colleagues flew in Europe?
They're, I guess in wartime, Bud would have to speak to this, but I think most of the airplanes only went a few hundred hours, and they got so tattered or much war damage, they got replaced with new airplanes. A lot of from what I understand, a lot of the airplanes never even got an engine change. But so most of the engines were on and off an airplane in a few hundred hours at the outside. And some of them that we reworked today, we've got an inventory, have got stamping numbers when they went through military repair. And they show that they were, by 400 hours, typically they'd been through repair twice. Well, that's not enough service time for a civilian airplane to be used today. So we've kited the lower end, the timer on the bottom end, the bearings and the wheel case and all the mechanisms that drive everything for 1,000 hours. And we think they're probably good for 1,500, but we're not recommending that yet. We service the top end in 500 hours. So we've extended the life of them a lot, and some of that has to do with not using them as hard as they were used in combat. But a lot of it has to do with also with coatings and with the improved oil and some other things. But we've worked with through the engine. If we find a problematic part, we try to address that and put some new science and technology to it to try to make it better.
In the film we heard about World War II and how devastating it was, and almost astounding to think about the number of people who died, the number who were lost to other purposes as well, so that we could be here today and we can still live in a free country. But the losses were gigantic, Jack. How do you think about that?
From D-Day until the Japanese capitulated in 45, there was in 41 to 45, there was 170 airplanes a day that were lost. 7 days a week, 170 airplanes crashed, I would guess 40% of them were lost in training and 60% were lost in actual theater. But that translates back in my math to 220 airmen a day that were lost their lives in these airplanes. And so the impact on today's population and the gene pools that survived is diminished significantly. by the victims of the people who tragically lost their lives in airplanes in World War II.
Yeah, Bud, when you hear the numbers that we said earlier and Jack just mentioned, when you're flying not every day but almost every day, what kind of numbers of airplanes had to go up in the air in these raids over Germany that would allow us to believe those kind of numbers of people lost and planes lost?
Well, they were tremendous. They're kind of incomprehensible in today's terms. But we flew daily with raids of 1,000 bombers, or 800 to 1,000 bombers, and equal number of fighters to go with them. It was tremendous to see an armada of these airplanes flying through against the cumulus crowds, and the line went as far as you could see. They were about in little three-ship Vs, and then they get about 60 of them, and then 60 more, far as you could see, bombers. And when they were making contrails, they were particularly impressive. And then you had the fighters going with them, and it was a pretty majestic show. And while we were talking about casualties, the 8th Air Force, one of 17 air forces that they had during World War II, suffered the most tremendous losses of any of the air forces, and in fact had more people were killed in the 8th Air Force than they were in the Marine Corps for the entire time of the war. And people don't realize that. They think of the Air Corps, that's the country club for the war. But 8th Air Force over Europe was the most dangerous place to be.
Speaking of 8th Air Force, when Jimmy Doolittle took over as commander of 8th Air Force, what changed in terms of the war?
Oh, well, let me put it to you this way. There was two significant things that happened. The arrival of the Mustang in Europe, so it could escort the B-17s wherever they wanted to go. And Jimmy Doolittle, who took over the 8th Air Force, when we arrived over there, our orders from 8th Air Force was to stay with the bombers. You had to be with them. They wanted you around them. They wanted to see you. And when the enemy came in, we were supposed to drive them away and then come back. You could go to 18,000 feet, and if you hadn't shot the guy down, you had to knock it off, come back up. Well, that wasn't the way to defeat the Luftwaffe, as we found out. We weren't doing a real good job about it. The classic way to do it was to have the bombers go in, blow up the factories and the airfields and the airplanes on the ground and all these resources, fuel, oil, and stuff like that. But that wasn't working. In late 1943, matter of fact, they had a stand down. The losses were so high, the Luftwaffe was destroying the B-17s and the B-24s at such a rate that it was not, we couldn't stand that kind of loss rate. So they said, well, we got to have these Mustangs. And they had some in the 9th Air Force. The 354th Fighter Group, great outfit, was there in the 9th Air Force waiting for the invasion, and then they were going to do ground support. So they said, let's try them. And they were so wildly successful that the 8th Air Force demanded that they get P-51s. We were the next unit to be equipped, and so we were transferred to the 8th Air Force before we even flew combat. So
Doolittle, you were supposed to go back and stay with the bombers.
Yeah.
Doolittle changed that. So what did he do?
So Doolittle, the impact of Jimmy Doolittle was he changed that policy. And he said, well, it's in his book. You read his book, and he went down to the 8th Fighter Command, and there was some kind of a thing over the door. It said the mission of the 8th Fighter Command is to bring the bombers back safely. He said, who put that up there? General Kepner says, I don't know. It was there when I got here. He says, well, take it down. He says, the mission of the 8th Fighter Command is to destroy the Luftwaffe. And he removed that restriction on us. And he said, from now on, when you fighter pilots engage the enemy, you take them to the ground and kill them. And it was called Pursue and Destroy. And it's how we defeated the Luftwaffe. The Luftwaffe had to be defeated before we could invade the continent. And so how it was done is we actually killed their experienced pilots. They ran out of pilots. They had plenty of airplanes, so they didn't have pilots. And that made the bombing easier, and so it was a big combined effort. But those two things made a significant impact on the war in Europe.
Do you know, with all the honors that you have received, all the recognition, your 7,500 hours, you're the highest ranking living ace today in the country, American. 5 DFCs, 2 Legions of Merit, Bronze Star, 16 Merit Medals, and on with these honors. The pilots are honored, but at the same time, as you're explaining, these planes, and Jack did earlier, these planes have to be maintained to be able to fly. How important to you were the ground crews?
Oh gosh, my crew chief story. I always want to tell it because our ground crews, they didn't get. Of course, they were not doing the dying, but they wanted to contribute too, just like we did. But nobody knows who the heck Bud Anderson's crew chief is. Right. But I have some stories to tell you about how significant their help was. For example, I flew 116 combat missions. That was 2 tours, which was almost 500 hours of combat flying, without a single abort for any reason whatsoever.
Right.
Now, I should have aborted a couple of times, but I was on my way home anyway, so it didn't count. But I found Otto Heino in Nevada when we were training in P-39s, and I kept him almost through the whole war. And he was an unusual guy. I could tell that he was a perfectionist. And one time we were flying these old beat-up P-39s in Tonopah, Nevada, and we had the armor glass like that, and then like that, and then a gun sight right behind it. You're looking at them like this, the armor plate, and then the gun sight glass, and there's only 1/8 of an inch through there, and would get dust and dirt and stuff in it, and it's right in the middle of your vision. And he came to me one time and he said, "What can I do to make this airplane better for you?" Well, it was already running like a top. And I said, "Well, that gun sight is terrible. We can't see that. Can't see through there very well." And I knew if you had to remove the gun sight and clean it and put it back, then you had to synchronize the guns and all kinds of workload. So I just mentioned that to him, and then next morning I come out to fly, and the gun sight and the armor glass are crystal clear. I said, "Wow." I said, "How do you do that, Otto?" He says, "Oh, I found a turkey feather and I ran it in and out there and got it clean." But he was innovative. And then when we got over to Europe, he would, we had regular new spark plugs and
rebuilt or
re-engineered or rebuilt spark plugs.
Basically cleaned.
Yeah. And he went over and found another Finnish guy. He was a Finn in Air Corps Supply, and he says, "Now you save the new plugs for me." And so, and he changed the plugs every time, every mission that I flew.
Now they had so much tetraethyl lead in them at the time, they would tend to contaminate the points, and they would migrate to the points. Then you'd have a spark plug that didn't work. So it had to be cleaned or replaced every time.
Yeah, and you know how hard it is to get on those inside plugs on the V. It was a lot of work, but he did that. That's the kind of things he did. And the story I really want to tell you, too, I was trying to get to it, was in the fall of 1944. I'd come back from my R&R at home, and I picked out a brand new D, and it was first painted like this airplane in dark green camo. And I was flying missions in November, and the first snow hit Germany, and it was Germany, and you could tell it was heavy snow, and it was going to stick around. So I know I'm going to finish my tour sometime in the winter, and so I'm looking at. We weren't. That would be one little box of B-17s. Can you imagine those as far as you could see? But anyway.
So winter's come, snow on the ground.
Yeah, and we're flying now. We don't care about the paint schemes too much. We were having silver ones, dark camo, half and half. It was just kind of a, who cares? Well, I cared. And flying over there, we used to fly in that, what we call figure four. And I'm looking down at two airplanes on the snow that are camouflaged, dark, and two of them that are silver. And which ones would stand out? The silver, the camo ones, of course. So when I got back, I'm in my revetment, and he was a flight chief now, but he always came back, and he handpicked a new crew chief for me. And he was always there when I left, and he was always there when I took off. And how'd the flight go, and all this stuff. And I said, well, it's great, and everything's fine. But by the way, when you get this thing laid up for heavy maintenance, would you please depaint it and put it in a natural aluminum paint scheme? I explained how it showed up against the snow, and for tactical reasons, it might save my butt. I didn't think about it too much, and went back next day. I was the operations officer. I decided to fly tomorrow, put my name on the board and went home. And the next day, went home. Went back to the barracks. And come back in the morning, get ready, go get the briefing, come out to the airplane. My airplane was parked in a revetment. I had to walk up the steep edge of it. I got up to the top and I looked down, and here it is, painted just like this in gleaming aluminum. And I was shocked, you know. I just thought about the manpower of taking that thing. They used 145 grade fuel to get rid of the fuel. The three of them were standing there kind of at attention, and I felt like, I don't know, I felt like a jerk. And I said, did they think I gave them a direct order to do that? And then I thought about it a little bit, and no, you know, they wanted to do that. That was their contribution, you know, their extra effort to do that. And I just can't say enough about the crew chiefs of the world. And you guys that own airplanes and fly airplanes, I think you might pat your crew chief on the back once in a while and thank them for what they do.
Jack, yeah.
I asked Colonel Anderson a question yesterday that I been in for it seems like 20 years, but I asked him a question yesterday that I didn't know the answer to, and I think you might be interested in his answer and what stood behind it. But I knew that he flew the 1D model when we had lots of D models in 44 and 45. He flew 1D model for his first tour, for his second tour, but he flew multiple airplanes in his first tour. And I was curious how many B models he had in his first tour. I guess this is the one he finished his first tour with, but he told me that he had 3 airplanes, but he never got a bullet hole in one of them, and I was curious what happened to the other 2 airplanes.
Well, the first one wasn't painted up quite as fancy as this one was. It had Old Crow right underneath the exhaust stacks, kind of with a stencil, you know, just a white stencil board.
Like Tonopah.
Yeah. And a young pilot by the name of Boyle was over Holland and got shot down, had to bail out of it. And so that's number 1. Number 2, I don't remember the tail number on it, but I exchanged it for whatever this dash number is. I can't remember, but the engines were slightly different, and I wanted that engine, so I picked out this airplane, 823. That's not the real airplane, but it's painted like it. And then we were allowed to put the red and yellow on them and paint the tail red later. And
you had the Malcolm Hood on it too.
Yeah, and that's the one I kept, and I shot down 13 in that shared Heinkel 1/4.
Yeah, how do you shoot down 1/4 of an airplane?
Well, you share it with 3 other people.
So a group effort?
That's a long story if you want to hear it.
Wait, Jack, when you hear this, 500 combat hours and all these stories that you've continued to hear, what goes through your mind when you think about what he and his colleagues did?
Well, I'm just glad I didn't have to cross swords with Bud Anderson back in his youth and his prime. He was a considerable adversary, and for him to be able to survive the early days, the dark days in the war before it turned in our favor, and when we didn't have enough airplanes to go around, and we were still learning how to make the guns fire all the time, and there was a lot of obstacles he had. For him to be able to survive that is not only because he had good maintenance and good parts and good people on the ground behind him, but he did an outstanding job in the air and against the adversaries he faced.
What's the significance of the 2 words, Old Crow? You want to whisper?
I have a prepared statement there for you. On oh, well, I was afraid you're going to ask that. I tell my non-drinking friends, my Baptist friends, that it's named after the most intelligent bird that flies in the sky, the crow. Well, that's true. The crow is a very canny bird. They've even been known to make tools to help them get food. And but my drinking buddies all know it's named after that good old Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey.
Bud, you're a group, 357th Fighter Group. How successful was the fighter group compared to other groups?
Well, they had the heritage groups were already in England, the 4th and the 56, and they had already established a pretty good kill rate, but they couldn't go as far as we could go. They couldn't go all the way to the target and back. P-47s couldn't make it. P-38s could just barely make it with their tanks. And we could make it and go back again, theoretically.
But in terms of kill rates?
Oh, yeah. We came into the war in early 45, and these groups had been over there already flying since 1942, really.
Yeah.
And our group established a kill rate of, how many kills you had a month for the first, for our duration, which was about 14 months. And it was higher than any other fighter group. But the kill rates of the 4th and the 56 were up there around 600, and we were just below 500, and just below 600. We were almost even with them, but we ended up being the 3rd ranking group in the 8th Air Force.
No, I understand that your last... Oh, excuse me, go ahead.
Wait, no, we had 42 aces, and I think that's more than any fighter group over there.
We read that your group's 357th last mission shot down 57 and a half German airplanes. How many of those did you get that day?
It was my last mission.
Oh, your last mission. Excuse me, your last
But
mission.
it wasn't the 357th last
your
mission.
last mission.
God, you really come up with a... Well, as the story goes, Chuck Yeager, a young, eager flight officer, joined our unit when we were at Tonopah, and we became half-assed friends there. And he got shot down early in the war in March on a mission, and he escaped. He got with the Free French, and he finally got out to Spain. And he was supposed to be interned there for the remainder of the war. Well, I think our government made a deal with him and traded him for some gasoline to the Spanish people, and they released him, and he came back to England. And he wanted to finish his tour. They said, no, you can't do that. If you've been shot down in an enemy territory and escaped, you don't go back there because you could be captured and tortured, and you don't give up the secrets of the Free French and stuff like that. But he persisted, and after the invasion, he got up to as high as General Eisenhower, I think it was, And Ike said, well, it's your ass, son. If you want to, go ahead. And so he's going to finish his first tour while I'm doing my second tour. And that's where our friendship began. We got into December, and he came by and he says, let's finish our last mission together so we can go home together and maybe be assigned to the same place and continue our friendship. So I said, yeah, I can make that happen. I'm the operation officer. I'll know how to schedule it. So the day comes and closer, and he says, it sure would be hell to get shot down on your last mission. And we had a couple like that. One of the famous aces, Gabreski, was shot down on his last mission. And he says, I have a plan. He says, when our group goes out, when our squadron goes out, we always sent 2 spares behind. He says, unless you and I go as the spares, and if we don't have to fit into if nobody aborts, nobody turns around for any reason whatsoever, let's go in with them, and if nobody aborts, lets us go on a sightseeing mission down southern France and tour the Alps and all this kind of stuff. A beautiful country. We had, of course, seen it many times, but, we'd never gone down there and really looked at it. So the day comes, 14th of January, 1945, and we're going boards. Our group goes ahead. We make a 45, and we head south. And pretty soon we're flying along down there, and Jaeger's he's flying on my wing, I think. And he says, hey, there's a Mount Blanc down there. Let's go down there and drop our tanks on it, strafe them, and see if we can set them on fire. Holy smokes.
Literally.
Well, I was a 22-year-old major, very responsible. Hey, that sounds like a good idea to me. So we dropped our tanks on it. And on the side of the mountain. This is the winter time. There's nobody up there. There was big glass plate structure up there at the top, but there's nobody on the sides, and it's in the winter anyway. So we drop our tanks and we strafed them and tried to set them on fire, but I don't think we did. You read Chuck's book, then read mine. But we shot our guns. That's the important
you
thing.
told the truth in your book, right?
We shot our guns, and that put black stuff over the wings, and the tapes are gone and everything. So then we go down sightseeing. We buzz the lakes and the hotels and all this stuff down there at the edge of Switzerland, and then head home on the deck. Northern France was still occupied. All the way home on the deck, and we're the last 2 guys home, and we buzzed the field, which was customary for your last mission, and pitched out and came in and landed. And I'm taxiing down. I turn down and I see Jaeger land. He's already landed. He's taxiing in behind me, and I got this real warm feeling about, oh man, I'm all done. I don't have to fly another combat mission and everything, and I just have a good feeling. And I pulled into my hard stand, and oh wow, I looked down there and there was all kinds of people standing in my hard stand, and I thought, oh, by the way, I'm the leading ace. I'm the one that shot down all the most airplanes in the squadron. And I went, holy smokes, how did they find out about this already, And then I said, oh no, it's my last mission there. They'll pat me on the back. They don't even know. So I spun the tail around and shut it down. Otto jumps up on my wing and he says, Andy, he says, the group shot down 57 airplanes today. How many did you and Chuck get? That's the story of how Chuck Yeager and Bud Anderson missed the biggest air battle of World War II.
Bud, jump ahead. You come back from the war, you become a test pilot. And occasionally TDY go from Wright Pat out to Muroc, it was called then, before it was changed to Edwards. What was Muroc like then? Why was it chosen to test airplanes there in the first place? And what was it like in the late 40s?
Well, Wright Field was the place to go. And that's where I went. But Muroc was there as an Army airfield. It hadn't been designated yet. We were still in the Army Air Corps. I mean, yeah, U.S. Army Air Corps. And they kept a field there because of a natural resource, this huge dry lake. I mean, you can, I forget the dimensions of it, but they're just incredible. It's when you have an emergency and you look down there and you think, I got to put it on that little 7,000 foot runway, which looks like a postage stamp compared to a dry lake. Well, oh, hell, I can land anywhere, you know. And it's just the right place to do hazardous testing, first flights, things like that. So they had a base there so the contractors could come and do their, make a first flight on their new vehicles and any kind of a hazardous testing they wanted to do. And then later all the X-planes landed on the lake bed, so they didn't have to be so precise. They could come in and land on the 15-mile runway rather than a 15,000-foot one. And with unlimited overruns. So it became a very special place to do flight testing.
What was it like in the early 50s? We hear just anecdotally that was maybe the greatest single period of flight test because of all the developments were made in the early 50s.
Yeah, well, the golden years, yeah. Well, we did a lot of that at Wright Field and a lot of the experimental stuff, in-house stuff. But when you went out there, you were going to fly somebody's brand new airplane or some kind of new engine or something like that. And it was just so important to have that valuable resource there.
Right. You flew scores and scores and scores of different airplanes. Did you ever have a favorite?
A favorite airplanes? I got 3. A P-51, of course, because it got me through the war. And they are a beautiful airplane. They make a great sound. And they're a great airplane to fly. And then I always liked the F-86.
Why?
I don't know. It was the first swept-wing jet fighter. It could exceed the speed of sound in a vertical dive, wide open throttle, just barely, but it could. And it was a beautiful airplane, and it had no bad tricks, never surprised you, and I just loved that airplane. Then the newest airplane I got to fly, a lot of times the newer airplanes are the ones you like to fly, but in more recent times now, the airplanes are flown by the computer, and you put the software in it, and that determines the flight characteristics of the airplane. So almost all of the new airplanes fly very nicely. just as far as going out and having fun and stuff like that. And besides that, they'd have all the new bells and whistles, you know, for weapons and stuff. So after I retired, the Air Force invited me to fly in the front seat of an F-15 Eagle two-place. And that was a special thrill. That thing has got so much thrust. It's almost it's almost more than a pilot can stand, or an old pilot can stand anyway. So the F-15 Eagle is my other favorite, because I haven't flown anything newer than that.
Right. When you were 18 months shy of retiring, you had the opportunity to go to the Pentagon and fly a desk before you retired. And you passed it up and volunteered to go to Southeast Asia, and did, and commanded the tactical fighter wing of F-105s. Why did you do that, and what did your friends say about your decision?
Oh, you don't have that exactly right, but it's close.
Well, then straighten me out then.
I got assigned to the Pentagon, and I didn't want to go there because I had a short time. I was close to mandatory retirement of 30 years. And if I went there, I knew that that's where I would be, and I would die right there. And I'd been to the Pentagon before, and I volunteered for Korea to get out of that one. And so when I got there, I had the opportunity. I wasn't really promotable. I didn't have any, if they promoted me, I would not be retained. And so I was just filling time. And they said, hey, we got a requirement for someone in Southeast Asia. You have to be you have to have been a wing commander, and they have to be checked out and the equipment combat ready. And of course, I filled the bill with the F-105 from being stationed in Okinawa. And while I was in Okinawa, I thought, surely I'll go to Southeast Asia. But there's only so many rooms for colonels, and so, no, I'm going to the Pentagon. Well, anyway, this opportunity came up, and I said, shoot, I think I'll volunteer. And I talked to Ellie about it, and she was pretty supportive of me, believe it or not. And I don't know, what are we in the Air Force for? To fly and fight. And so I decided to go.
When you were there, your son Jim, to fly and fight sound a bad title for a book, maybe. Your son Jim?
Oh, yeah.
Aviator, Air Force officer, aviator flying what, the O2? O2A? What was he flying?
Yeah, the O2. He was in special operations.
Right.
I know what you're getting to.
So you want to just go there without me saying anything?
He feeds me a few lines, and then I've got to pick it up. This is a story about father and son flying a combat mission together. And he went to the Air Force Academy, graduated in '69, and his first duty assignment, well, after flight school, his first duty assignment was to Vietnam, and he went to Special Operations Squadron in Ben Hoa, and I was in the Pentagon, and I made this switch And so then I go to Thailand. And so we're over there together. Same time frame. And I had this, all the wing commanders were called into 7th Air Force in Saigon. And so I called my son and I said, hey, I'm going to be in South Vietnam on such and such days. Any probability that we could get together? So he says, yeah, come on down. So I went a day extra. I flew an F-105 in and landed at the other base, Tunsinut, near our headquarters, and gave him a call on the phone. And I said, hey, I came a day early. How about we somehow or other we get together? The bases are pretty close. And he says, how would you like to go on a combat mission with me? And I said, what? He says, how do you want to go on a combat mission with me? And I says, well, sure. He says, well, stand by. You know, now he's a new head. He's a brand new second lieutenant. He hasn't been there 6 months. And he comes back, and God, it seemed like less than a minute. He said, it's all set. He said, I'm coming over there in an O2, pick you up, bring you back over here. We'll spend the night. In the morning, I'll have you back there for your mission, and we'll fly for my briefing, but we'll fly a mission on the day before. So sure enough, that's what happens. And he was in a special ops squadron. And I don't know whether you know the configuration of a O2. It's a push-pull. It's a Cessna 337. Has a push-pull engine and a boom tail. Well, the Air Force modified them, called them the O2A. And they had a little seat in the back. And on these special operations airplanes, they had a little compartment, almost like a Bombay, you might say, but very small. So the mission he picked for us to go on, they had speakers out on the wingtips like this, and they'd go over these strong communist strongholds and propaganda, broadcast propaganda for, so many minutes. Then we'd come by and drop the surrender leaflets or the safe passage leaflets. So normally you've got an aircraft commander, which could be a second lieutenant or a captain or major or something, and then a kicker, which was usually a three-striper. And he'd sit over here and he'd work the radios, and then when it came time to drop out the leaflets, he would do that. So in this case, you got a brand new second lieutenant, and you got an old full colonel as a kicker. And we go out, and they had done this for years. I could make this sound real hazardous, but they knew exactly where to fly, how high to fly. You could see them down there shooting AK-47s at us. And we'd go over like that when we were running around and come back and made a pass over. And said, oh, Dad, just throw out the leaflets. And I leaned over, and my favorite knife flipped out of my flight suit and went sailing down into the jungle, followed by lots of leaflets. Anyway, words can't describe the emotions you go through flying on a mission with your own son, a combat mission. But my late wife, Ellie, had a few words to say about it. She was damn glad she didn't know about it until it was all over.
Jack, how much do we owe as a country to this airplane and people like Bud?
Well, the airplane itself came as a result of the mobilization of the U.S. industry. You know, we made not only airplanes that won the war, we made ships and tanks and trucks and ducks. I know they had in Branson, Missouri, they had a World War II duck that sank and killed some people the other day, but those ducks were a big part of the invasions that they had not only in Europe, but also in the South Pacific as well. So we had the military, had the industrial complex stoking the providing the bullets and the guns, and then you had a group or a generation of self-sacrificing, motivated youth that were able to go carry the fight it was a world war on two engagements, one in the South Pacific and the other, of course, in Europe. And I know my dad, I was born the day after Jimmy Doolittle went into Tokyo. If he'd have been on schedule, if he had the fishing boat hadn't have seen him, I'd have been born on the day he went in. But I was born the day after he went in. But the self-sacrificing mindset that that generation of young people had was unbelievable. I know my dad worked in a engine factory in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he didn't get his papers to be in the Navy until 43. It was almost, the war was 2 years going when he got in, and he told my mother, he said, I could get a deferment because my boss told me you give me a deferment because I'm working on this engine factory that made engines for the B-29, as it turned out. And he said, but I'm not doing it, I'm going to war. And I know he had one brother, his brother had asthma, and he couldn't go because of his asthma, and I know that bothered him his whole life.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Roush and Colonel Bud Anderson. So, Sam Bass, you're up. Our program's not over, folks. Sam is going to come out and talk with Jack Roush and I think Ray Fowler, another wonderful aviator, about these two airplanes, if you have questions about these airplanes.
Good afternoon, folks. What we're going to do is try to cover these airplanes, and I can't think of any more authority on the different models, but if could get Jack to tell us the difference between the A, B, C, and the D, and the why for of the Allison, getting rid of the Allison, and from that point on.
The British Purchasing Commission came over in 1940 to see the North American people to try to get them to build P-40 Warhawks under a license from Curtiss. And the North American people were doing a nice job with the B-25 and with the AT-6. And they really were too proud to build what they considered to be an obsolete airplane. So they offered a proposal that in the 120 days it was going to be allotted to tool up the P-40, they would prepare a prototype for a new airplane that had a number of innovations that the NAA had been working on, and that they felt would reach to the future rather than behind where the airplanes were at the time that were involved in combat. So in the 120, actually about 105 days, they had their work done on the first prototype. They were not able to get an engine because of the lack of priority that they had to get an engine from Allison. The Allison was the only V12 engine that was available. The Merlin was not a consideration at the time. So they waited for another week or 10 days to be able to get their Allison engine, put it in, and of course they flight tested it. And it was at low altitudes. It was 50 mile an hour or so faster than the Curtiss the Warhawk was, and they got an order for the production of what was the P-51As, which ran out of Allison engine did in the P-40 at about 11,000 feet. Had a critical altitude where it wouldn't make power that was necessary to be involved in combat really in much over 11,000 feet. Then the U.S. came back and looked at it and says, well, it's an interesting airplane, and they were anxious to take advantage of some of the capacity that North America had to produce them, because they were getting airplanes, anybody that could make an airplane that was at least competitive for what they were facing on either theater, they would place orders with. So they ordered some A models and they ordered some A36s. If you think about the benefits of the round engine and not having a cooling system, it was not a great application for it. Then about a year later, the English and the English, after they had their hands on the early A models, and which were ground attack in Europe, ground attack airplane in Europe, they put a Merlin in one. And at about the same time, the people in Dayton that were doing the experimental testing put a couple of Merlin engines out of the Spitfire that had a two-stage supercharger, two-stage, two-speed with supercharger with an aftercooler in it, and made a service ceiling possible up in the high 30s, if not the low 40s, 40,000 feet. And of course, at 30,000 feet, it was again 50 knots faster than anything else that was flying that was available at the time. And so then that's about the time, as Colonel Anderson said, that Colonel Doolittle got the control of the 8th Air Force and decided they were going to beat the Luftwaffe out in front of the bomber streams. And they wanted the P-51B models, which had the Spitfire engine, Merlin engine in them, to carry that fight on. And of course, the rest is history. Everybody knows about the rest of what happened with the B models, C models, the Ds. They had H's and K's that were later dash numbers for the airplane. The H models was an airplane that really didn't have a common part. Maybe the wheels were common. I'm not even sure of that. But the engines were common, but the engines were different as well. The propellers were common. But it was a complete airplane. It was about 500 pounds lighter. The K airplane was went from a Hamilton Standard prop to a Curtiss Electric propeller. It was the only difference in it. But the other airplane that they did that you don't hear much about is a P-51 or a F-82. It's a P-82 initially, and it was an F-82 after they changed the designation with the Air Force, becoming a form of its own, a branch of its own military in '47. But the F-82 was the twin fuselage Mustang that they only built a handful of. It really wasn't a great flying airplane, according to Colonel Anderson and General Yeager, who flew both of them. But there were just short of 16,000 Mustangs of all varieties built. And they were flown by more air forces than I can put on my hands and feet over the course of the 30 years that they flew in service.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it. Nobody else knows more about it than you do.
Thank you,
so,
thank you, Sam.
Anyway, Colonel Anderson is over here, and he's signing his book. If you have any kind of aircraft library, if you don't have it, you're missing something. But he's over here. He's selling it. We also have our programs. They're here, and they're also over there, and he's there to sign those programs. Well, thank you, folks, for coming. It's great seeing you.